Welcome back, Whisky fans. I've got another Laphroaig today. I think Laphroaig must be my most reviewed distillery. It's got to be. And that's absolutely not a coincidence, because it's one of my favourite distilleries. I think that you make absolutely incredible whisky, and it's great to see that these days we are starting to see some age statements come back. Obviously, I've reviewed both the old and the new 18-year-old expressions recently, and we've got this one here which is a little bit of an odd one, because it's a 16-year-old whisky, and it is or was a core range release, but to start with it was an Amazon exclusive. But it doesn't seem to be anymore. It is popping up on some other websites these days, so you no longer need to give money to Jeff if that's something that puts you off, and I know that for a lot of people it is. This stuff, I think I bought it for about 80. It did sell for about 80-90 pounds. I have seen recently, and I think that it's probably linked to the reintroduction of the 18-year-old core range release, that this does seem to be creeping up in price a little bit. I've seen it about the £100-105 mark lately, which is a shame, but it's still a lot cheaper than Laphroaig are asking for the new 18. And even though it might sound a lot, if you want a late teenage Islay whisky these days, you're really limited to this, or a 43% weak Lagavulin 16, or the expensive Bruichladdich Port Charlottes. So relatively, this one is a pretty good price still. It's also, really pleased to say, bottled at 48%. Show you a little close up of the tube there. So really good ABV on this one. As for the presentation, they don't tell us a lot. This is 48%, which is, in my opinion, well worth an extra £10, and just shows you that Lagavulin sticking to 43% are just ripping us off. Of course, you have also got the Ardbeg Trevan, which is 3 years older than this, but sells for £250. And, well, we're not stupid. If you can remember that far back, this one was actually originally released just after the 15-year-old limited edition that commemorated Laphroaig's 200th anniversary, but unlike that 15, this is still available several years later. Looking at the tube and the bottle, sad to say, as is very common with Laphroaig, there's no guarantees about natural colour or non-chill filtration with this one. Start as you mean to go on, Laphroaig. But it has got a gold stripe on it. Look at that, so fancy. Any Nikon shooters out there, you know what I mean. So fancy packaging aside, this appears to be a very good value offering these days. It's certainly much cheaper than, I think, all of the alternatives of this kind of age range and ABV when you're looking at Islay whisky, which you do pay a premium for. Islay have proven themselves. They are still the kings of peat. There are some mainland alternatives these days, but Islay have rightfully got to a point where they can change a premium for what they sell because it's world renowned. So Laphroaig 16-year-old on the nose. Very bright, very fruity, very, very bright. It really has a brightness and a playfulness to the spirit which really kind of goes against the higher age statement on this one. I think that the bright fruitiness on this one, it immediately kind of tempts you to make comparisons to old style Laphroaigs, sort of stuff that's distilled in the 80s and 90s, back when Laphroaig just had a much more fruity estery house style. Kind of similar to the bright, playful fruitiness that we got in the old 2013-14 edition of the 18-year-old, but a bit simpler on this one, but a similar level of bright playfulness. But that's not to say that this one is not phenolic. I think that the peat on this one, it definitely feels more than both the new and the old versions of the 18, and probably peatier than the old 15 as well. I think, in a way, the relative youth of this, which is an odd thing to say about a 16-year-old whiskey, but it is relatively the young whiskey in this comparison. I think that the youth really carries it better than the new 18. It's just got that interesting combination of bright spirit and dark brooding smokiness. Quite aggressive. I think that this one is not as gentle and subdued as either of the two 18-year-olds. Quite oaky, smoky, dry, oaky wood smoke on the nose, and burnt charred oaks like freshly charred bourbon casks, and charcoal and barbecue. Quite earthy, and a little hit of chlorine and grapefruit. So it is definitely peated, and it's medicinal, and it's very Islay, but it's a different peatiness. I think it's a different peatiness to the 18s, and it's also a different peatiness to like the 10 cask strength. It has got that Islay peat though. Islay peated grist, a little bit of TCP, menthol sweets, again mintiness showing up as a tasting note on Laphroaig. TCP and disinfectant floor cleaner. Quite industrial and fumey, dirty, a slightly, ever so slight ugly side to the peatiness in this one. A little bit of like an industrial degreaser note. Good salinity as well, salty driftwood. A little bit of that lovely orangey maltiness that I really love in the old bottling of the 18, but really a much more subdued version. And a little bit of curiously, an appley note to the maltiness on this one, which really puts me in mind of like a peated Speyside. It's not often that I get kind of like a sweet green apple note in a Laphroaig. I think in a way, because this is a slightly peatier and younger and more youthful and more supple Laphroaig, I think that out of this and the two 18s, this one is the closest to like the 10 cask strength, while still showing good development of flavour from that extra time in the cask. In fact, I'd actually say that because this it seems to have retained more of the peatiness and more of the cask flavours than the new 18-year-old. It seems like, compared to the new 18, this seems like the more intensely flavoured dram. Sweet and smoky lemons with sea salt, a little bit of tangerine, sweet vanilla, and a little bit of an Ovaltine maltiness. And just when you think it's gone, that medicinal note comes back with a little touch of light clove. Always wonderfully phenolic, but bright and malty too. Let's see how it tastes. I think that the peat comes through much clearer on the palate with this one, with that trademark Laphroaig sweet peated grist, but I would say that it's really not heavily peated by Laphroaig standards, especially if you're used to things like the 10 cask strength and quarter cask. Certainly plenty enough peat though, with lots of TCP and bandages, as well as some sour, ashy fruitiness. Sour grapefruit and salty limes, sour, salty fruitiness. Much fruitier than most modern Laphroaigs. I'd say that it is the most fruity of the current core range. Also with a lovely sweet smoked honey note, salty and smoky barbecue. I'd say that this 16, it is a young 16, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because as I said before, it does carry more of those pleasant, youthful Islay flavours. I don't think that this has the age of either of the current 18s, although I think that it's surprisingly close to the new 18, and with that extra character from the peat and the oak in this one, I think that it makes it really great value for money relatively. On the late palate, there are signs of the age in this one, or more signs of the age than the rest of the experience. On the late palate, I'm getting quite a nice, oily, malty walnut note, which is something that I associate with older whiskies, and I think it just goes to show where those extra years have gone. Gonna have one more sip and look at the finish. Definitely good age on this one. I think that it's really only a slight bitter saltiness of the cask that really reminds you that this is a slightly younger whiskey. On the finish though, growing peatiness. As the other flavours fade away, that peat and ash seems to grow a little bit, and the salty oak comes back as well. Sweet peat, sweet honeyed malt, and a sour medicinal lemon finish. I think that this whiskey, especially considering the price, is a fantastic balance of old and young. It's probably not a coincidence that a lot of people, I seem to remember people saying that 15 years is the perfect balance of old and young in whiskey. And I think that this one really sums that up well, because it is 15 plus 1. And I think that it's a great Laphroaig that's not too old or too young, and it benefits from both sides of the coin. For the price, absolutely for the price of this, I would always buy this again over the new 18-year-old. I think that it's on par. I don't even think that the new 18 at nearly 3 times the price is even better than this, and I think for the money, this is the one that you want. It's definitely the one that I would want going forwards. I also think that this is probably the best spiritual successor to the old 15-year-old because of this, and in my opinion, it has its differences, and I think I probably prefer this one to the old 15. With that sweet and lemony and smoky peaty profile, when I was tasting this, it did keep reminding me of something else as well, which is a little bit odd and unexpected, but it's Wolfburn Northland. And you might think that that's pretty damning for an older age statement Laphroaig to be similar to a whiskey that's 10 years younger than half the price, but it also kind of makes sense when you consider that Wolfburn Northland is a very, very high quality, fruity distillate that's actually matured in Laphroaig quarter casks. Personally, I'm a big fan of Wolfburn, and I think it's a credit to Wolfburn and Laphroaig that I am getting similar notes on the two. I think that the age on this one has had a dramatic mellowing effect on this whiskey. I think that if you want a strong, peaty, phenolic Laphroaig, then this is probably not the one for you. I think that it's also clear that they've used very fresh casks for this, which is pretty much the Laphroaig style these days. I think that the final verdict and summary of this whiskey, though, has to be that we have to acknowledge that this is the affordable, available, higher age statement Laphroaig, which really offers value for money these days. It's the cheap premium option from Laphroaig. In my opinion, with this one, you have something which is arguably the equal to the new 18-year-old, but at half the price. And I think that if you're the kind of person that's looking for a very balanced, older and gentler and slightly more subtle and complex version of Laphroaig, this might be something you'd be interested in, especially when we consider that pretty much all of the other options that were available to us are either gone or much, much more expensive than this. And I'm reluctant to say this, we won't use the D word when we're talking about this one, especially considering that they've re-released the 18. But all I'll say is that for now, this one is available and at a good price, but it wouldn't surprise me if this expression has a shelf life. Let me know what you think about this one if you've had it. I think that it's really the no-brainer if you're looking for an older Laphroaig that's not going to break the bank. And I think for what you pay, you get a really good dram. Let me know what you think. See you next time. Cheers.